Spring break, a time for sun, fun, and making memories with friends. But for one group of college students, their spring break took a dark turn they'll never forget. This is the story of what happened when a group of friends decided to rent a secluded beach house for the ultimate getaway. Little did they know, they weren't alone. The house was older than it looked in the photos. The paint was peeling, the windows were dusty, and the air smelled damp. But they brushed it off. It was just a house, right? They were here to have fun, not worry about the decor. It was supposed to be the perfect vacation. 5 friends, Emma, Jake, Sarah, Mike, and Chloe, had been planning this trip for months. They found a beautiful, secluded beach house on Airbnb. It was cheap, private, and just a short walk from the ocean. The pictures online looked amazing, but when they arrived, something felt off. They tried to laugh it off. "It's just the wind," they said. "We're in the middle of nowhere. Who else would be out here?" But deep down they all felt it. Something wasn't right. The first night was perfect. They built a bonfire, told stories, and laughed until their stomachs hurt. But as the night went on, strange things started happening. Chloe swore she saw someone watching them from the tree line. Jake heard footsteps in the sand, but when he looked, no one was there. That night, the noises started. At first, it was just the house settling, or so they thought. But then came the whispers, soft, barely audible, but unmistakable. Sarah woke up in the middle of the night, convinced someone was in the room with her. She woke the others, but by the time they turned on the lights, the whispers were gone. They searched the house, but found nothing. No one could explain it. The next day, while exploring the house, Emma found something strange. An old journal hidden in a drawer. The pages were filled with frantic handwriting, detailing the previous owner's descent into madness. The entries spoke of shadows moving on their own, of voices calling from the ocean, and of a presence that wouldn't let the writer leave. The last entry was a single sentence: "If you're reading this, it's already too late." Things took a terrifying turn on the third night. Chloe went to bed early, complaining of a headache. But when the others woke up the next morning, she was gone. Her bed was empty, her phone was still on the nightstand, and the front door was wide open. They followed the footprints to the beach, but they stopped abruptly at the water's edge. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Desperate for answers, they started digging into the house's history. What they found was horrifying. The house had been the site of multiple disappearances over the years. Every spring break, someone would vanish without a trace. The locals called it cursed. They said the house was built on ancient burial grounds, and the spirits of the dead demanded a sacrifice every year. The friends realized they weren't just staying in a creepy house, they were trapped in a nightmare. On their final night, the house came alive. Doors slammed shut on their own. Shadows moved across the walls. And then they heard it, Chloe's voice, calling to them from outside. They ran to her, but as they got closer, they realized it wasn't really her. Her eyes were black, her skin was cold, and her voice, it wasn't human. She whispered one word: "Run." They didn't look back. They ran as fast as they could, not stopping until they reached the nearest town. When they told the police what happened, no one believed them. The house burned down that night, taking all evidence with it. To this day, they don't know what happened to Chloe, but they all swear they can still hear her voice, calling to them in their dreams. So, if you're planning a spring break trip, be careful where you stay. Some places are better left undisturbed, and some stories are better left untold. Spring break is supposed to be a time for relaxation, adventure, and making memories. But for one group of friends, their trip to a remote cabin in the woods turned into a fight for survival. This is their story. 6 friends, Alex, Mia, Ryan, Jess, Chris, and Lily, decided to spend their spring break in a secluded cabin deep in the woods. It was supposed to be the perfect escape from the chaos of college life. But as they drove further into the forest, the atmosphere began to change. The GPS stopped working, and the road seemed to stretch on forever. By the time they reached the cabin, it was already getting dark. The cabin looked different from the photos. It was smaller, darker, and surrounded by an eerie silence. The key was hidden under a rock, just as the owner had said. But as they stepped inside, they couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. Jess noticed it first, a strange symbol carved into the wooden floor. It looked ancient, almost ritualistic. But before they could discuss it, the door slammed shut behind them. That night, the noises began. At first, it was just the wind howling through the trees. But then came the scratching, like something was trying to get in. Ryan went to check the door, but when he opened it, there was nothing there. They tried to laugh it off, but the tension was palpable. As they settled in for the night, Mia swore she saw a face staring at her through the window, but when she looked again, it was gone. The next morning, Chris was gone. His bed was empty, his phone was still charging, and his shoes were by the door. They searched the cabin and the surrounding woods, but there was no sign of him. His footprints led them deep into the woods, but they stopped abruptly, as if he had vanished into thin air. That's when they found it, a clearing with the same symbol carved into a tree. Back at the cabin, they discovered an old journal hidden under the floorboards. The entries were written by the cabin's previous owner, detailing strange occurrences and a ritual to appease the spirits of the forest. The final entry was a warning. If you hear the whispers, do not follow them. They will take you one by one until there is no one left. That night, the whispers began, soft, haunting, and impossible to ignore. They seemed to come from every direction, calling their names. Alex swore he heard Chris's voice, begging for help. Jess wanted to go outside and look for Chris, but Ryan stopped her. "We can't leave the cabin," he said. "It's not safe." But as the night wore on, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Mia was the first to break. She stood up, her eyes blank, and walked toward the door. "I have to go," she said. "They're calling me." No matter how much they begged her to stay, she wouldn't listen. They watched in horror as she vanished into the trees. Her screams echoed through the forest, and then silence. By morning, only Alex, Ryan, and Jess were left. They knew they had to get out of the cabin, but the forest seemed to shift and change around them. Every path led them back to the clearing with the symbol. Desperate, they decided to perform the ritual described in the journal. It required a sacrifice. One of them had to stay behind. In the end, Ryan volunteered. "Take care of each other," he said as he stepped into the clearing. Alex and Jess didn't look back. They ran until they reached the road, where a passing driver picked them up. When they told their story, no one believed them. The cabin was never found. To this day, Alex and Jess don't know what happened to their friends, but they swear they can still hear the whispers calling them back to the forest. So, if you're planning a spring break trip, be careful where you go. Some places are better left unexplored.